Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. We're going to talk a little bit about some tight supplies. What happened with the Nebraska cattle when it came to their grade? Well, Cattle on Feed report comes out on Friday, but we've had some good cash market numbers this midweek. We have got a lot to look at, so I'm going to quit talking about what we're going to talk about. We'll let Brad do all the talking. As you can see, Brad Kooima is joining me. He's with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's talk first of all about this cash market. Pretty great to see midweek.
Boy, for sure. And last week, too. In fact, Susan, thanks for having me on, by the way. I was, as an old school fundamentalist, I'm always encouraged when the market cares about the fundamentals. There are times it seems like that it doesn't. And today even, I thought maybe with the way the news was that we could have traded better. But we can talk about that here a little bit in a minute. But last week's cash up a couple, and now early indications this week. It's only Wednesday. And, just not very long before you and I started this deal, I was hearing confirmation again of some more 187, this time in Nebraska. Earlier this morning, it had been a packer reaching down into Kansas and paying a little bit of 187 picked up. And now I've got two regional packers that have done that in Nebraska. So that's for sure one higher, maybe more like two higher. And asking prices here in my backyard are better than that. I mean, I think with the shortage of cattle that'll grade, if you've got a set of black steers that you think will grade well, I think these guys are asking, more like someplace 188 or north of that. We'll see how that all falls into place. But, I think it gets lost in the shuffle. I've mentioned it so many times with you, but to me, the difference in my part of the world here is it's the middle of October. This would be when we're always struggling to get rid of those last big, long-fed, farmer-fed calves. 1,650, 1,700 pound cattle. And, this year, there is none of that. I would say that, I don't know, general, just subjective show list numbers here are much less than half of what they have been this time of year sometimes. So the difference between being pulled ahead and current or being backlogged is it's huge, so hopefully cash is king again this week, I hope. And that's what dominates futures, because we have to offset some of that geopolitical stuff that's going on, right?
And there's a bit of that going on. Last week and even the week before, you were talking about where the South was at number wise and how current they are. Are they still looking to the North to fill some of these orders?
Absolutely. In fact, was anecdotally heard again today about cattle being exported out of the North, most notably Nebraska, South. And I think, the supply transition happened a little bit, and I think it's about done with too, because I don't think we're in a burdensome number by any means in the North, but I think things got quite snug in the South, Susan, which required them, if they were going to, or partly the supply, but also they may be looking for some cattle that might grade a little bit better, to try to, some of those plants are, more, their MO would be a more of a high choice and prime kind of a animal to slaughter. And I think they're a little hard to come by. And I that leads me into wondering a little bit if there's a backstory to that. Noticing that the grade in Nebraska last week really fell apart, which is unusual this time of year, because a long-fed calf will grade like crazy, right? I mean, it's days on feed that create grade. So I wonder if maybe some of that might be that we exported some of those cattle out of Nebraska to a different state, and so that's where that's going to show up in their grade reports. I don't know. It's subjective, obviously. I'm guessing, but it's what kind of I do here, right? Either way, it would still certainly look to me like generally our industry is nicely current. The weights have gone up, but they always do this time of year. The grade remains poor.
Is that part of the reason we're seeing a big push on Saturday kills, just because the numbers are there?
I think it's because the backer's making a little money. What do you think? I don't think he likes to pay overtime any more than any other employer. And all these second guess expert demand people, which I'm getting a little tired of, because they don't know, neither do I. It would tell me that still, and I still hear the out front business for beef going into this fourth quarter is really good. And so I guess if a packer's going to add a Saturday, I'd sell he's either got meat sold or he likes his margin, and maybe it's a little bit of both.
Well, you talked before we started this program, as we were talking about some of the numbers on the futures, and you were talking about 188.10 on the chart. Kind of give me a little bit more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, because I beat you up with nothing but fundamental stuff, right, so far. And some of your listeners probably like to draw lines and, and all that other stuff, right? Well, Obviously, I take that seriously too, because it's a big part of our market, because that's what the funds trade, and fundamentals are hard work. So a lot of people don't do it, but it would certainly appear to us that if I had to put the parameters, I'd go 185.60 to the bottom side of the D's cattle. I wouldn't like the market underneath that, but closer to and better deal is if we could get above 188.10. I think if you get above 188.10, we've taken 45,000 out of the open interest here this last while. As that long speculator has put his hands in his pocket. I get it. That's what always happens when you get this uncertainty. And we're talking, of course, about what's going on in the Middle East. But if we get something here where the market's saying, well, you know what, cash is 187 or 188. Futures typically this time of year, December, would be $5 or $6 above cash, not at the same price as cash. And all of a sudden, if you get through that, where you got a technical signal now to get those funds to say, hey, we better come back and go get our positions back on, then it could get pretty. I think something like that would give us another leg up. Whether that happens right now with the uncertainty that's going on, the timing doesn't feel great for it. And I could have easily seen the board trade better today. When that cash news got better and better like that, the old days, we'd have banged right along, and I just think you got a lack of buying because of the speculator that's busy watching the news and not daring to stick his neck out. Understandable.
And that's that part you talk about, that with the news and everything else in the stock market and the cattle market. You said there's kind of an interesting correlation right now with the way they're moving.
Yeah, for sure. It's no secret. I've got the S&P chart right up here on one of my monitors, and I mean it's silly, but it is what it is. When we took the lows out on the S&Ps this morning, even though the news was really good on the cattle, we went from 50 higher to lower for the day. And then we came back off the lows a little bit on the S&Ps, and then we go back. I did like the way the spreads traded today. Front months led the backs. And I think some of that could be a little bit of anticipatory. There's a cattle on feed report Friday. Lately, I haven't really fretted much about cattle and feed reports, because I just think that we're so current that they can do whatever they want to with a placement number. But I know there's a crowd that is concerned about the placement, and I guess I should be too. Some areas had big placements, no question. And maybe that's what's starting to weigh into the back end of that market a little bit. And frankly, these summer cattle prices up at 187 and stuff, it's a big price. That's today's market. And you're asking the market to stay that good for 9-10 months. Sure. But that's no easy task, not given the uncertainty in the marketplace.
All right, we have run out of time in past episodes that we haven't had a chance to talk more about basis for cattle, and I wanted to make sure we gave some time to that today.
I think that's a good question, and broadly, basis has shifted the last little while, and I think, or it changed, I think, in character. And maybe this is just my opinion. You can take it for what it's worth. But the market has gotten browbeat by these black swan type events. And that's created a lack of confidence, I think, in the long speculator. And what that's done then is kind of prone to give us a deal where the futures are almost like trading below cash, saying, okay, we'll believe you, cash, if you prove it to us. And otherwise, you've got to drag me along. It's frustrating. Futures are supposed to be what we think is going to happen in the future. It's pretty straightforward. Specifically, to give you an example, December cattle, middle of October. Typically, where would December cattle futures be compared to cash in the middle of October? Well, whether you look at the 5-year or the 15-year average, it's anywhere from $4.50 to $6.50 premium. Typically, December cattle would be roughly $5 over cash. We're at 187.20 today. One could argue basically on par with cash. So, if somebody says to me, wow, December cattle look awfully overpriced, they look awful high here, I'd say not really at all. Actually, they look a little bit underpriced compared to what normally would be a typical basis situation.
Well, we've had lots of interesting things happening in this trade, and I know folks want to continue to have that conversation possibly with you, Brad. How do they do it?
Well, you can call me. We welcome any of that, of course. 800-358-3047. If you want to know a little bit more about us, so go to kkvtrading.com and you can find everything you want about us.
All right. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll catch up with you with more next week.
Sounds good. See you then.
Just a reminder, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. And that's this week's Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network.